everyone for joining, and thank you for such a lovely intro. I do get asked a lot of questions, and they can be kind of group. I think the question I get asked the most, and people who know me find this kind of surprising, is what sort of diet should I have? Give me a good diet. What should I be eating? And anybody who knows me will know that I'm not the diet person. I basically feel that you know how to eat. Everybody knows that broccoli is better than apple pie. And there isn't really a diabetic diet. What I do tell people when they ask that is start looking at your CGM data, and I'll be talking about that more. See how a diet affects you. Second one that I get, and this has come through on all of the questions that came, are the differences or the issues with CGMs. Is Libra better than Dexcom? How do you make it more accurate? What do you do with a reading that you don't agree with? Are they accurate? It's a hard question, especially when you're trying to rely on it. And I know for sure, as everyone here does, that they're not always accurate. This is your pancreas. If you don't agree with it, go with your pancreas because it will know better than your Dexcom. We saw a lecture a few months ago, and I'm hoping the gal comes back, from a CGM technologist, and she taught me something which is kind of interesting. Dexcom 4, 5, and I believe 6, you were to calibrate them. Dexcom 7, those rules are out the window. The more you calibrate Dexcom 7, the less accurate it becomes. Freestyle, you could never calibrate it. However, the research has shown overwhelmingly the use of a CGM is not just considered recommended, it is considered essential, which means it is as important to you as your insulin. And then the last one is, what should my A1C be? And that one's becoming a little harder to answer because I went to the American Diabetes Association last year, and there seems to be two camps now. Those of us, and I'm one of them, who feel that A1C should be retired. Many people think that the A1C is a 3-month average, and it isn't. It's more like this, where the last 2 weeks are the most heavily weighted, and the first 2 weeks, not as much. The other thing is A1C hides too much. And then the last thing is we have such a better parameter to look at, your time in range. So your A1C, it's changing. The standard now says an A1C under 7 is considered appropriate. For someone who's much younger, such as Caleb, who's quite young, her A1C goal might be under 6.5. For someone who's my age, I'm almost 70, it would be under 7. But it basically comes, how low can you go with fewer lows? So those are my 3 questions. I've had several submitted, so I thought I'd just start answering them.
Okay, so Gerri,
Yeah.
do you mind if I ask you the questions and
Sure.
you answer them?
I'll go for it.
So I
Yep.
can kind of pace everything.
Yep.
So we've grouped this in sections, and the first segment is blood sugars and control. And the first question comes from Anonymous: how to best handle lows to avoid those crazy spikes?
That's tricky. And I would direct you to the Huddle episode 45. Alana Chambers did a really good one on avoiding the spikes. I would direct you also to look at your data, look at your compare reports, see what your standard deviation. Second thing is to be very gentle with both corrections for food and for getting the blood sugars down. You shouldn't look like the Himalayas. If you are, you're going up and down. So look at your standard deviation. We don't know exactly where your standard deviation should be. If you're going into a pregnancy, we suggest a variability of under 2. That's pretty hard to get. Usually, people who reach a variability of 3 mmOLs are doing exceptionally well. So look at your standard deviation, look at your daily graph, and kind of think, I was up really high and then came zooming down. What activities or what did I do to bring it down? Timing of your insulin is a big deal. You may have been able to take your insulin 5 minutes before the meal, but now if you take it 5 minutes before, you go up to the sky with your blood sugars. So look at your timing to try to make it better. Does that help?
Yes, and do you want to talk a little about standard deviation, just in case someone is not aware of what that terminology refers to?
Standard deviation is how much do you swing? If in a given day, how much do you go up and then come zooming down? And that's in mmol. So if your average is, say, 7, and you have a standard deviation of 2, at any given time, you might be as high as 9 or as low as 5. However, if you've got a standard deviation of 4, you might be as low as 3 and as high as 11. So it's the swings, and you want to try to reduce the number of swings. If you look at your daily graph and it kind of has peaks and valleys, you've got a high standard deviation.
Okay, so question number 2 from Anonymous. Why are my blood sugars so constantly high, even if I don't eat? I go through so many days of being high and I can't bring my numbers down.
Brown, 42 things that affect my blood sugar. For years, we've told you that the only thing that affects your blood sugar is diet, exercise, and insulin. We were wrong. There's a whole bunch of stuff that affects your blood sugar, including coffee without cream and sugar. Exercise can bring your blood sugar up for certain exercises. I think that the thing that we used to call dawn phenomenon is actually dreaming. When you dream, your blood sugars spike, we think. The other thing is that while we think that your food goes into your gut and is absorbed fairly quickly, the nerve damage that happens to feet, and your feet kind of go numb sometimes if you've had long periods with high blood sugars, that is also happening in your gut. Aging will also do that, so that it could be that your insulin is going in and out, but you still have food in your gut that's not being absorbed yet, and that's why your blood sugar goes up. You would have to check and correct. So one of the other ways is use of an Omnipod or a tandem pump that would extend a bolus. So let's say you find that whenever you eat pizza, a lot of people talk about that, that when they eat pizza, they go up to the moon and they stay up fairly high. So that's because the cheese and the protein aren't being absorbed when we think it is. And the insulin goes in and out, and then you've got food in there that's being released into the bloodstream, causing your blood sugar to go fairly high. We suggest you extend your bolus. And in fact, the Warsaw calculator, another Elena Chambers recommendation, suggested that, and it's now, if you look at it, it's called the Omni calculator. Omnipod is going to put it into one of their pumps, but God knows when that'll happen. So you've got to have to start looking at it and try to figure out how much extra insulin you should give for fat and protein. Those of us without a pump, all hope is not lost. You can use what Dr. Edelman in San Diego calls the poor man's pump. If Warsaw tells you to extend a bolus and you don't have a pump, you would have to take extra insulin. So if Warsaw said that you needed 5 extra units for your fat and protein, you would take your regular insulin, and then a couple of hours later, take another 2.5, and a couple of hours after that, take another 2.5, so that and that process is called the poor man's pump. There is a little bit of literature that says that you can get exactly the same results with the poor man's pump as you can with a pump. It's work, so that I'm not going to tell you, oh, it's easy, just take extra shots. It's work. You have to be on it, but you can do it.
Okay, the third question is from Kim. What can I do to help with the 3 a.m. blood sugar spikes?
Kim, I would have a look at your daily graph, looking back and see when your blood sugars start to go up and figure out when you last ate. So if you, like I do, and they tell you you shouldn't, but I do it anyway, I eat dinner about 9 o'clock. So my food would go in and probably last till 2 in the morning. But if I were taking insulin at 8:30, they would predict it to be gone by 12:30. So once again, I look at your spikes and see if you're still absorbing insulin or absorbing food, but your insulin is gone. Second thing, and this is harder, are you dreaming? Do you remember any vivid dreams through that time? Because there's very little you can do with dreams because you can't predict them. And you probably would have spikes, but you may see just a quick spike for that. Third would be to look at your long-acting insulin. If your long-acting insulin isn't sufficient, or because they say Basaglar lasts 24 hours, not always, so that you might switch your Basaglar or your long-acting insulin to nighttime dosing and see if that helps.
Kim, do you have any follow-up? I haven't been asking people about follow-up. Usually if it's anonymous, I don't ask, but Kim, did you have any follow-up for Gerri?
No, that's very helpful, Gerri. I actually have never heard of the dreaming um kind of like idea either, which is really interesting. I am a very light sleeper, so I would say more often than not, I am actually dreaming, but it just is very consistent right now that I'm waking up at like 2, 3 a.m. And my last meal, like I'm stopping eating probably by 8:30 p.m. So it feels like a really long stretch if it is to do with food and it's still waking me up at like 3 a.m. But I find that I go through waves of like the dawn phenomenon, and then it all kind of like calms down, and then maybe a couple of months later it comes back up. But I'm just like can't figure out
Is
what
it your
the
cycle?
correlation is.
Is it your cycle?
It could also be that I haven't like linked those two things, which is a whole different ball
Yep.
game.
Yep.
Um, so it could also be that as well. It's just like
It's
really
hormone.
frustrating to wake up and feel that high and then just have to like inject, and I'm not on the pump. I'm still doing manual injections.
And I'm looking, there's a chat. Could 3 p.m. spike be gastroparesis? That's exactly it. Yeah, it could be. It could be very, very well gastroparesis, that it's just taking a long time for your food to get through your gut. Do you feel bloated at all?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that could be it.
Okay, interesting.
And when do you take your long-acting insulin?
So I take that at nighttime. I do Tresiba and I do that at 10 p.m. like
Hmm.
just before I go to bed.
Yeah.
And I did up my dose slightly to try and see if that helped, but I don't know, sometimes it just feels like there's no rhyme or reason.
Yes, that's the smartest pancreas, or the smartest endo is not as smart as the sickest pancreas.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. No rhyme.
Thank you, Gerri.
And are there medications for gastroparesis?
There's something called Maxaran, which is kind of a drug, a very old drug that was used for a variety of things and didn't work very well and seemed to help. There's various diets. I think you go on um, you watch how much fiber you have so you don't have bulky. You watch how much fat you have, but there's not a whole heck of a lot that you can do about it other than making sure that you're getting enough fluid, getting enough exercise, have a regular bowel routine, don't eat too late. Yep.
Okay. All right. Next question is from an anonymous person. Can the liver release glucose into the blood during a low blood sugar? Sometimes when I have a blood sugar below 4 and I take 15 grams of sugar, my blood sugar goes up above 11 and I end up having to take 1 to 2 units of insulin to bring it down. What can be done to prevent this roller coaster?
Well, and type 1 isn't type 1 isn't type 1. There's a whole bunch of different ones. There are some that go into ketoacidosis and then others that don't. The other thing is we concentrate on the insulin with type 1, but in fact, it's everything to do with the pancreas. So in a system that doesn't have type 1, when your blood sugar goes low, your livers and muscles release sugars to maintain your brain so that your blood sugar doesn't get too low, so you lose consciousness. There are times in type 1 that whole system goes out of wonk. However, in some cases, when it goes quite low and the person seizures, at that point, the glucagon kicks back in and raises the blood sugar up. We don't know when it's going to kick in for people who live with type 1, so that's always the big question. How high are you going to go? The other thing is gentle with the corrections. It's hard not to eat the kitchen sink when you're low and headed downwards, but gentle with the corrections. Take fast acting sugars. People say Dex 4 tastes like chalk. And I kind of think that's a good thing because you won't eat them. They're not candy. And you know for sure that that will bring your blood sugar up. And 1 to 2 of those and wait 10 minutes and then see how high. But you can't predict how high it's going to go. And if you have a flight and fight reaction, your flight fight will bring your blood sugar up, and you can't predict that. So yes, you're probably on the good side, being aware, and you're correcting. You're taking care of the highs. You're thinking like a pancreas, and it's hard. There is no automatic in this. You've got to be, that's your pancreas. So good for you for correcting.
Okay, whoever asked that question, would you like to follow up? Okay, the next question is from Doreen. Why am I waking up at 3 a.m. with low glucose almost every morning? I have adjusted my basal glar.
It's got to be adjusted again. That's if you're having 3 a.m. and later blood sugars. So basal glar doesn't get started, we think. So let's just step back. So insulin all looks the same. It's clear and it looks like a liquid. It's a water-based product. But the long-acting insulins act more like a jelly, so that once you inject, they usually don't get started to working for 2 to 3 hours. Once it gets started, we think it lasts 24 hours, but if you're going low at 3 a.m., you've got too much. Some in the past, when we did insulin, we used some of the long acting to cover meals, and that's probably not a good idea because now it lasts 24 hours, and there will be times in your day where you don't have food in your gut. And if you have too much long acting, you're going to have lows. So if you're having lows through the night, decrease your long acting. And if you have highs during the day, increase the mealtime.
Okay, Doreen, I'm not sure if you're on, but if you're on, do you want to follow up? Okay, so the next question is from Anonymous, and I think you've talked about this, but if you have any additional information to convey, why might someone's glucose levels considerably fluctuate while sleeping?
Well, and I'm going to take the positive. You're looking at your graph. Fabulous. And I remember having one endocrinologist said, when you get control of your diabetes and stop the fluctuations, yeah, that'd be cure in my mind. So you will have fluctuations. You try not to make them too much, because if you're going up and down too high, that's too much. But people who wear the CGMs, my boss has put one on and was quite shocked that he went up to 9.5 and 3.5 during the day in one day. You will have fluctuations. Be glad you're on the right side of the dirt then. Have a look to see what the standard deviation, how much you're fluctuating, but you will have fluctuations. And it's supposed to
Okay.
happen.
The person who asked that question, would you like to follow up? Okay, the next question is from Glenn. It's a really long in a really long context. So Glenn, if you're here, did you want to ask your question yourself? Okay, I'll ask the shorter one. I understand that the automated insulin dosing system has been approved in Canada using the Dexcom sensor. Any idea when this will be available in British Columbia and if the government will be funding it?
Short answer is it's already being funded. It is Omni 5. It is approved in Health Canada. It is not covered under Fair Pharmacare. Tandem IQ is also a Health Canada approved closed loop. Does everybody knows what looping is? Not so much? Okay, so with looping, you wear a Dexcom G6 or G7 and you use your phone to capture that data. With looping, for the Tandem, it marries the Dexcom to your insulin pump. So think of my right hand with my Fitbit as my blood sugar, and the left hand is the insulin. So when my blood sugar goes up, pre-programming would increase the insulin, and when the blood sugar goes down, it pulls it down. Tandem IQ is Health Canada approved, but not covered under Fair Pharmacare, and it's a funding issue, full stop. Omnipod 5 is also a closed loop. But I'll tell you some experiences that we've been having in my clinic at BC Diabetes. So we've got a number of kids from the States who have used Omni 5 and Tandem and are having to go on the regular Omnipod Dash. And what they're telling us is that because of the pre-programming that you can't change in both Tandem and Omni 5, that they are limited in the number of things they can do with the closed loop. When you're doing do-it-yourself looping with just a regular dash, everything's open. You don't have any firewalls that you can't get past. So that the question was, is it covered? Can you get it? The short answer is yes. However, the stuff that's covered under Fair Pharmacare would have to be not Health Canada approved, and it would be do it yourself. There are a few physicians across Canada that are assisting. And in fact, Peter Sr., who's in Edmonton, was very instrumental in creating a position paper for Diabetes Canada. He said that someone like me, I've got a nursing license and a college that says, yeah, you're not helping with looping, but I have to be able to support you, get you resources to help you do it, and I can't discharge you. I can't say, if you're going to do it yourself, I'm going to discharge you. Your physicians have to stay with you. We can get you support to do it. So, and there are a lot of supportive people out there. And there are a lot of people across the world who are doing do it yourself.
Okay, Glenn, I think you're here, but give me another chance to ask follow up. Okay, the next question is from Anonymous. What's your sense on when or if, and if smart pens for MDI and cordless automated insulin delivery systems, like an Omnipod, but with AID capabilities, like Tandem's IQ, when do you think it's going to become available in BC?
Now, I'm not sure what the reference to smart pens
Yeah, I didn't
was.
understand that term.
That smart pens to me are just pens that will keep a record of how much insulin you've taken and when. I use smart pens for people who perhaps weren't able to tell me when they took their insulin, or someone who had memory issues, so that I'd be able to look back at their last 10, and they are available. They're a little tricky to get because the companies don't like to provide them, but you can get them. The only one that uses it was Nova Rapid, but you can phone around and get another smart pen. The Omnipod with AID capabilities exists. It's Omni 5. It is Health Canada approved, but once again, it's not covered under Fair Pharmacare. And all of that is simply funding.
Okay, the person who asked that question, would you like to follow up? Okay, the next question is from Kathy. She wants advice on possibly making a switch from Tandem to Omnipod because it is waterproof, and she's looking for input.
And that one's got a lot of the simple questions have a lot of information that's needed. So the first thing I would do with this question is find out what uh, your fair pharmacare is, because if your fair pharmacare is at a level that you're not going to get very much relief, you get to choose whichever one you want. So for my son, we get no relief from Fair Pharmacare, so we would choose whichever pump he liked the best. Many people are not going with Tandem because of the very long tube that used to be. But I was at the ADA last year, and the tube is this big. They've put the actual pump on the skin now, and they can get a waterproof thing over top. If you're paying for your pump yourself, it turns out that Tandem over the time for the pump would actually be cheaper. So if you're relying on Fair Pharmacare, I would go with the Omnipod. Omnipod has a limit of 200 U, so 2 cc's of 100 U insulin. 100 U means the concentration of insulin, and you can't refill it. Whereas Tandem, you can disconnect and refill the pump and not have to change the sensor. In addition, for Omnipod, it stops working, even if it's got extra insulin, after 80 hours. It wants to be changed at 72 hours, and the alarms will drive you crazy as it beeps away, but it stops even if you have a whole bunch of insulin left in it. Tandem does not. So it's a matter of who's going to pay for it. Are you able to pay for it yourself, or you're going to have to anyway? So then you decide which one is better for me. The Tandem sensor, or the Tandem delivery system, is about the size of a quarter, and it's got a lower profile. The Omnipod is about an inch and a half thick, and some people find it quite heavy. So the other thing you want to look at is, what is your skin condition? If you're able to wear a freestyle, you will be able to wear a Omnipod. However, if you're allergic to anything in the freestyle, you won't be able to wear an Omnipod. Omnipod and freestyle use something called isorbate acetate, and it was named as the allergen of the year 2020. some of the younger folks won't remember this, but does anybody remember the cigarette lighters that we used to have in the cars? If you have an allergy to isorbate acetate, I swear it looks like they've been burned with a cigarette lighter. This is a big allergy. So that some of the decisions on pumps would be, can my skin tolerate it? And then it's preference.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I cannot wear Freestyle Libre because I'm allergic to it, but I have been wearing an Omnipod pump now for years and I don't have any problem. So I don't understand why, but it's just worked for me fine.
You're a lucky lady.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
I
good
love
for
the
you.
pump now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, so maybe people could, I don't know, give it a try because
yeah.
I really had an awful reaction, and not at first with freestyle, but after maybe a
After,
year or
yeah.
two, and then I just, yeah, like everyone else thought it was the glue, but the pump is just great. So I don't know.
Now, and you bring up an interesting problem. We have a saying in pump care, you don't have an allergy yet. Your
Right,
skin is your biggest organ. So
right,
treat it gently. Every adhesive is an assault. So you put on a CGM, there's one. You put on an Omnipod or a Tandem, there's two.
right,
You put a patch over top, there's three. And it's like taking pills. You take 3 pills, you're going to develop an allergy much quicker.
right,
So I tell people to treat your skin gently. Many people use alcohol on their skin before their injections,
mhm.
even though the World Health Organization stopped it more than 10 years
Ah,
ago.
really?
No, nobody smells. I can't smell you folks at all. You're clean. Everybody take a shower.
Oh,
Seriously, I went into I used to be a home care nurse, and I would go into the single room occupancies. If those guys don't get an infection, neither are you. Seriously, if you shower once a day and you're good, um, it
okay,
you don't use hand gels. Anybody use hand gels and their hands just fall apart?
right.
That's an assault on your skin. Don't use stuff that smells really strong because that's an assault. You want to be very protective. 4 things to keep you from having an allergy. I would go see or use ostomy or ileostomy products. Number one, those guys do not want their poop bag falling off on the
Right,
Canada line, so they know how to keep things on, and they know how to keep allergies from happening quickly.
right,
Everybody's going to have some type of allergy with this. Dexcom, for a long time, and they've stopped, used a latex, which was even a more serious allergy than the one with isorbate acetate. Because if you have a latex allergy, it just keeps going up until you have a major one. They don't use latex based anymore. So,
okay. So can you suggest, is there a particular brand of like, are you saying that we should treat before I put my pump on, I should treat it with a skin prep that protects it?
well, and the one that I use or I recommend
Yeah,
is called Skin Tack. But no, if you're
yeah.
clean,
Okay.
I don't use any type of
That's so
anything.
interesting. Thank you. Because I am religious about it. So,
And you're going to be horrified. And I use my son as he injects through clothing. If you're injecting
oh,
through clothing, please use a
wow.
longer needle. He recaps all of his needles, and he doesn't have an infection, and his A1C is under 6.5.
Oh,
It
I'm so
cannot
impressed.
be, it cannot be do the process. It has to be take the insulin. We don't recommend it,
Yeah.
but choose your battles as long as he's
Oh,
taking his insulin.
thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, the next question is from Anonymous. Is there a looping system coming soon where Omnipod is going to be linked with Freestyle Libre? If so, what have you been hearing about this looping system?
And I've been asking for it, and the Facebook group called Looped run by Kate Farnsworth, and Kate Farnsworth has actually started working for Omnipod. I think that they had started working on it, but now that Kate is working with Omnipod, I think it's kind of slowed down. A lot of people are asking for it, but apparently it takes quite a bit of hacking into the Apple phone, and that seems to be the big barrier. At this point, no one is doing it. I know that BC Diabetes looked at it and just decided that it was not going to happen for quite a while. I would go to the Facebook groups called Looped or Loop and Learn and keep in touch with them, because at this point, there is no one who has been able to crack it and get Libra to be looping.
The
But
person who
there's a lot of people asking for it.
the person who asked that question, would you like to follow up? Next question is from Steve. Can we discuss matching and mixing fast-acting insulin when you are on MDIs? So EG base and then a Demalog, use Fiasp and a Demalog. So can you talk about that?
I'll use an example from my son. He was the first child in BC under 18 on a pump. And what we found on his pump, that his body would start making an exudate or try to get rid of the cannula from the Medtronic. And what they suggested was that we rotate the insulins, the fast-acting insulin. So we would go from Nova Rapid to Apidra to Humalog to Nova Rapid. Many people feel that if you switch, that you're going to have a reaction. I've seen minor changes, and I would certainly say if you are switching, heads up, you want to say, I used a Demalog today instead of Trurapi. How did it work? That would have been one of your 42 things. But absolutely, check to see what works for you. Fiasp works quite well for some people, but is it worth the extra monies, because it is not covered under Fair Pharmacare? So if you're paying for it, you're paying twice, because none of those monies goes towards Fair Pharmacare. Fiasp is the Nova Rapid with a niacin molecule. They didn't take it terribly well when I said, could you just take niacin? It would create flushing, but some people get great reactions from it and are willing to pay for it, but some just don't, and others just can't afford it. So my advice would be, yes, you can switch. The many physicians say not to, but my experience has been that you almost kind of stop using it. So I would say switch and see if you get a better glucose profile with different ones and just rotating.
Okay, Steve, if you're here, would you like to follow up? Okay, next question, anonymous. How to care for skin after the pump was removed from the site?
I wondered about that one and wondered if you had any sort of grief, or was it just a hole, or what's the issue?
Is
So
anonymous here? Yeah.
with wound care, and I come back from the dark ages where we covered everything. My advice would be not to put a Band-Aid on. If it's leaking, you'll put a Band-Aid on, but get that Band-Aid off as quickly as possible, because you're going to have an infection if you don't. Shower and pat dry. Don't put ointment on it. Leave it alone. If you are having lumps and bumps under, you may have a reaction or an allergy or something, and you might want to have that looked at. If you're developing abscesses, then you definitely want to have that looked at. I would say if you're developing abscesses, we used to say it's your procedure for putting it on and ask you if you washed your hands. Normally, it's not that. It's not something that you're introducing. It's probably because you're allergic to something in the pump per se. The one thing I would say is if you're having to shave before you put your device on, you should be at least 48 to 72 hours before you applied the device. Again, I came from the dark ages where we shaved everyone before their operations, major and small. And then we wondered why they had huge abdominal infections. Well, it turns out the little scraping that we were doing with the shaving caused nice areas for staphylococci that's in our air and in our environment to breed, and we were causing it. So if you have to shave, at least 48 hours before you slap something on and see if that helps.
Okay, the person who asked that, would you like to follow up? Next question is from
Oh,
Kim.
hi.
Oh, sorry, go
Hi.
ahead.
It's Steve here from the previous question.
Yes, hi,
I
Steve.
couldn't answer because I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I figured it out now. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
What I was interested in is actually mixing and matching Admelog and Fiasp because I find that Admelog is, even though it's fast, it's slow, and Fiasp is meant to be quick, and it's sort of a little quicker than Admelog. So if I'm kind of having dinner and I've forgotten to take insulin, I'll take the Fiasp, and then I might think, oh, I'm going to go to sleep. I need something to bring me down, and I'm not in a rush, so I'll take some Admelog. And so I don't know, mixing and matching.
Gently with the nighttime dosing of mealtime insulin. We usually say if you've taken a mealtime insulin 2 hours before you go to sleep, okay? But to bring your blood sugars down before bed is kind of tricky with mealtime insulin and then going to bed. But as for using Fias some of the time and a Demelog other times, sure.
Because a unit of insulin is a unit of insulin, right?
Yes, yes. Well, you'd think so, but
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So thank you.
But so just be careful taking a correction dose and then going to bed because while it may work slower, you may have less food in your bloodstream and your gut, and that's when it's peaking, and then you've got a problem.
Okay. And what I've just started to do, literally this week, is take some of my Basaglar at night, and I find that might be moderating my overnight glucose.
You may find that you're one of the ones that Basaglar doesn't last 24 hours.
It looks that way. Yeah, but
And
even 1 unit of Basaglar, will that make a difference? Because that's theoretically is 1 unit over 24 hours.
Yeah,
it's not a lot.
Yeah, that's right. And you might want to just switch your Basaglar dose to evening, and then if it's not lasting the 24 hours, then top up with mealtime during the day when you're awake anyway. Remembering that, again, I came from the dark ages, and we didn't have long acting, so you would have to take short acting quite often.
Or let's say I take 20 units, 10 at night and 10 in the morning.
Sure. Give it a shot. You are a science experiment of one. I wish I had better answers for you. But if you want to read something on this, Dr. Edelman from San Diego lives with type 1, and he writes books called Taking Control of Your Diabetes. And he talks about his own experience having to figure out how his blood sugars react when. Again, Adam Brown does that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, next question is from Kim VP. What's the best way to handle high sugars in hot countries like Mexico?
That's a trick. It looks like hot makes your blood sugar go up. So I would probably tell you to increase your long acting. If you're high all day, then you can safely increase your long acting. I would be careful with how effective your insulin is so that the efficacy of insulin goes down as it becomes warm. So if you're concerned, put it in the fridge. is always a trick when you're away because everything has way more calories, way more fat and protein, way more carbs than you think it does, and way more than you would be eating at home. So you simply need more insulin.
Okay, I happen to know some of you, Janet, have traveled, are very well traveled. So would you like to weigh in on when you do travel to hot environments? What are some tips that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess the only thing is that when you are traveling, you do have to watch your blood sugars fairly regularly. And but also when you're traveling, for me anyway, I do a lot of walking, and if I am in a hot country, I do a lot of swimming or snorkeling and things, and that can really bring your blood sugar down as well. So I don't usually have difficulty with my blood sugars going super high because I'm pretty active, and then with being on a pump, I just correct it if it's starting to go up. And the other thing I was going to say is one thing, for some people who were commenting about lows at night and things, I recently, I don't know why it took me so long, but I recently turned my lower alarm up to 4.5, and I usually had it, below 4, like about 3.9 or something. And so when it beeps at 4.5, I'm catching it a lot sooner. And then when you treat it, it's before it's getting way down there, because your monitors are about 10 minutes behind what it's really doing also. So those are some things to watch for. But when traveling, you do have to really monitor the blood sugar pretty carefully and be ready to take some corrections if needed. And also I have to really be careful of taking corrections near bedtime or anything, because my blood sugar does tend to drop at night pretty quickly. And so for correcting right before you go to bed, be very cautious with that. That's what I think Gerri said that as well.
One thing is if your blood sugars are above 16, now some authors say above 14 mmOLs, cautiously exercise. You probably shouldn't be doing a marathon if your blood sugars are about 16. Wait till they come down before.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in who is well traveled, especially in warm environments?
Oh, hi, it's me again. Sorry,
Yeah,
Steve.
sure.
You said don't do exercise if your blood sugars are above 16. So what if you're up at Whistler and you're going skiing and you've had a hot chocolate at lunch and your bloods are just fine, and then of course they start skyrocketing and they hit 15, 16, and you go for ski. Is that what's
in
going to
15,
happen?
16.
Well, they've
It's
just
more,
gone up. Let's just say literally they were fine, and then
yeah.
after lunch they just pop up.
And they peak and then go down. It's usually for a sustained blood sugar above 16, and people try to exercise it down, and it's not going to work.
Oh, okay, so
You
sustained.
can have,
Okay.
and if you've got high blood sugars and you start exercising, the chances of DKA go up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse
Okay,
me,
next.
Gerri, can I
Yes.
ask a question about this, what you were just talking about? If your blood sugar is really high, not to exercise, I'm confused because if my blood sugar goes really high, that's the first thing I do. I go for a walk, a 20-minute, half-hour walk, and it brings it down. So I'm confused.
And how high would it have been high, Pat?
You mean how long would it have been high?
Yeah, how long?
Oh, probably not long, because as soon as it reaches high, then I go for my walk.
Yeah. And usually the ones who get into trouble are the ones who have had it up for a couple of hours, and then they decide to go run their marathon, and it's probably not a good idea.
Okay.
You can't, there's always the ones who are able to do it and do it fine, but you're playing roulette.
Okay, so what would you recommend? Did we just do take some insulin then to bring it down?
Yeah.
Okay,
Get
thank
it
you.
down and then start.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question is from Anonymous. My son has been was diagnosed with diabetes when he was 18 months. Today he is 26. And a while ago, he started to get extremely excited and anxious about his blood sugars, and he sits in front of his phone to monitor his values. How can he return to a more relaxed monitor situation. So I think it's a worried mom.
I don't blame her. I get it. It really is. It's a fine line with these Dexcoms, with having all this information and having to check it all the time and not panicking over it. Um, I would get him a counselor. I might ask to go to the endo and see what the endo is giving out as how often he should be checking. Sometimes I think the healthcare team puts a lot of pressure, and people are concerned about making sure they've done right and they can bring it to me. But I would get him into a counselor to talk about it and to see if there's anything that we could be doing for him as a family.
Okay, I actually agree with that. And, if something happens all of a sudden, or it wasn't that way before, then you want to really explore what's behind the anxiety. It might not be anything medical. It could be something totally different, but what is kind of the source of the anxiety? And that's the only way you're going to be able to make any changes or fix that.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. Losing weight while on insulin pump is extremely hard. Do you have any tips or tricks beyond increasing exercise and reducing carbs?
It always surprises me that we give you an appetite stimulant. We tell you that you have to be intensively managed, but we don't mention, oh, by the way, you're going to be 10 or 15 pounds heavier than your peers. We tell you to lose weight then. So you will be heavier if your blood sugars are in control, because they're in control. The other thing you could look at is a GLP-1. A GLP-1 would be Ozempic or Victoza. I would be careful about using an SGLT2 inhibitor, which is Jardiance or dapagliflozin. Some type 1s can take it, and what that drug does is when your blood sugars go up, it reduces the renal threshold. The renal threshold is the point at which your kidneys pee out the extra sugar. And it helps you lose weight. It helps you bring down the blood sugars. Some type 1s go into DKA when their blood sugars are normal. So I never recommend a GLP or a SGLT2 inhibitor for people who are type 1. However, GLP-1s are injectable. They're Ozempic, that sort of thing. You can get Ribelson, which is an oral one, but I'm not a fan because you aren't able to titrate the injections. And it mimics a hormone that your pancreas and your gut makes to make you feel full and to speed up or change your digestive system so that it doesn't. For some people, they really slow down and they become quite constipated. Other people, they really speed up so that they don't absorb the same way and their blood sugars don't go as high. And that's why they lose weight. As for how you maintain a weight without doing the GLP-1, reducing calories and reducing the insulin and watching your blood sugar. It's a hard one, but also give yourself some credit. If you've gained weight, you're probably in fairly decent control, because that's the way diabetes works.
Those of you who are thinking about the subsequent or February or March huddles, we will have Jordana Capelouto, who is an endocrinologist in Vancouver, who specializes in obesity and the obesity medications, Ozempic, other GLP-1s. So just mark that on your calendar, because she really is definitely the province expert on this, and that's going to be the focus. Anonymous, do you have any tips regarding improving skin site healing after removing an infusion set? I rotate sites as well as I can and moisturize, but I have poor circulation and sometimes the area takes up to a week to heal. I want to try to keep my infusion sites as healthy as possible so I can continue using my pump for as long as possible.
I'm going to give some background on this. So does anybody know why
Oh, I think Gerri's frozen.
you were told that you have, not in mine. Are you okay?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you were frozen for like a second.
Okay, so does anybody know why you were told you have to use the back of your arms, your stomach, your tuchus, the legs? It was because of the size of the needle. So the size of the needle was to the point where if you had it up here, your chances of going intramuscular was quite high. Now we have 4 millimeter needles, and the chances of you going intramuscular, the recommendations on where to inject, etc. On somebody like me, I'm quite bony here. I've got not much fat, but I have lots of stuff other places. Because it's so short, you can basically use all your jiggle. And anybody who's done a pump training with me will know I say you got to use all your jiggle, honey. I have one guy who is severely disabled, and his mother puts his pump on his thin fat, he'll be okay. For someone who's trying to preserve their skin, move it around. Do you know why? It's because you're injected acid under your skin, and you're going to have lumps and bumps. You're going to have areas that don't absorb terribly well, so you have to move everything around. As for now, I'm interested in what you moisturize with. Anybody? I don't recommend much at all for skin, especially on areas where you're applying devices. However, if you feel like a potato chip and you need to, you might ask for a dermatology to see if there's something else going on that makes you take a whole week to heal. The other thing is you've had this thing sitting inside you for 3+ days. It sometimes takes that long. Don't put a Band-Aid on it unless it's really draining, and get the Band-Aid off before you get into the shower and keep it off for as long as you can, because putting a Band-Aid on just makes sure you trap all the microorganisms and it'll have an infection in no time.
Any response? Laurette, I saw your hand kind of raised, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to, okay. Okay. I recognize that we're 5 past the hour, and usually we stop at 7, but I knew that this was going to be a session that was going to be longer. So if you need to leave, thank you for coming. We'd love to see you next month. But if you're interested in staying and listening to the other questions and have your own questions, we would love it. We're open until 7:30. All right. So the next one. I keep getting occlusion in any sites that are not my belly. Any advice on how to change spots without occlusion?
Number one, you might want to rotate your insulin so that my son got occlusions a lot, and they said just rotate the insulin and see if that helped. It takes some convincing of the endocrinologist to order it. Have them call me. I'll talk to them. Usually they will after that. But the other thing is to make note of where, so it's only in your stomach. Have you tried the upper part of your backside and see if that also, it could be that you're quite thin and it's kinking. That cannula that goes in is very flexible, and it does kink.
Okay. That person who
Ed,
submitted the
we
question.
can't hear you. Sorry.
Does that person want to follow up? Okay, so next question. Do you have any insulin pump hacks? For example, your helpful tip of setting a temp basal at 0% instead of suspending.
So I guess my hack or the best advice is everything's okay. Look at your data, look at your daily graph, and see where you'd like to change things. And then look at all the options. So with suspend insulin, if you've got an extended bolus running and you're going low, you have to suspend insulin because you want to get rid of that extended bolus. But let's say, Janet, you're going for a walk, and last time you went for a walk, you knew you were going to go low. So I would tell you to put a lower basal rate down by 100% about a half an hour before you go for a walk. And that's just a crapshoot. You have to kind of figure out which is best for you. And then a half an hour afterwards. And what that does is stop the drip, drip, drip into your body. Alternatively, let's say you know that coffee always puts you up a bit, but you don't want to take a correction because if you take a correction, it goes in and out and you have a low. So you can increase your rate for as long as you're sitting in front of the computer drinking coffee. And it can, with Omnipod, you can increase it as high as 95% or as low as 100% down. And that kind of is a gentle way of increasing and decreasing insulin so that you get a more of a gentle wave with your blood sugars instead of the up and down Himalayas. My hack would be to try something gently and then look at your graph to see how it worked out.
Okay, any follow-up? Next question. Do you have any thoughts on the latest closed loop systems? You have talked about this some a little bit, but any other additional information?
Just that the Omnipod 5 is a dash with some closed loop systems, but it's got some firewalls you can't get past. And the kids from the States are saying it isn't as responsive. Tandem IQ has the same thing, but both of those systems are Health Canada approved, and you don't have to create your own app. On other pumps, I only think that you should go on a pump if you're looping, but that's my private opinion.
Okay. Next question. I'm grateful for the new technologies like pumps and CGMs, but I'm exhausted by all the alarms, the failed insertions, the false readings, and fussing that's needed. This is so seldom discussed. Am I an outlier? Do you have any thoughts or advice about this? Gerri, are you frozen? I
You're
can't hear
right.
you.
It is a lot. And okay. I don't know, frozen?
I can hear you coming in
I
and
can
out a
see
bit, but
myself.
your camera is definitely a little bit jerky.
I'm beside my thing. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make this better. Um, you're not alone. And I would go talk to somebody. It is hard. Unfortunately, you could try to take a CGM holiday, but they are considered essential to your care. So, changing your settings for a day so you're not getting as um, many alarms, and remembering how much you're doing for yourself. It is very difficult and really can get you down.
Okay. Next question. Could we discuss the Apple Watch and Dexcom? My watch battery will only give me 12 hours of charge after only having it for less than a year. The diagnostic tests say I have 94%. I have Bluetooth off as an alert is not always loud enough to awaken me. It seems very imperfect and almost useless system. Can we send a complaint to Dexcom as a group? Does anyone else have issues with this? I'm not sure if it is responsible for any battery issue. So anyone who shares the same frustration? And Gerri, please weigh in.
I have heard this. I have heard this to the point where I actually offered to get a smartwatch for my son, and he said no, it's just not robust enough. Absolutely invest in battery packs. I've heard this over and over.
Okay, now we're moving into a different topic area, food intake and digestion. Digestion and timing issues with insulin. How do you navigate those?
Carefully, with lots of experimentation. Try to get a FIASP syringe from your endo to see if that makes a difference, to see if you want to spend the money for it. I would say it's not foolproof. So, and remembering that even though in the past you seem to have been able to take it 2, 3, how many minutes before, timing changed. I had one lady who had been taking her insulin 5 minutes before for years and now has to take it 45 minutes. If it's a big change and you look at your graph, just keep going until the peaks aren't as much. But remembering you will change. There's not much else other than experimentation, because while the insulin companies tell you it will work in such and such a time, my experience has been it's different for everybody.
Okay, next question. We touched on this a little, but it's always great to have reinforcement. This is from Steve. How has Ozempic influenced people's glucose control?
I'd say about 1 out of 3 or 4 get no benefit. It doesn't seem to change at all. But the people who do, so if you do go on a Ozempic and you're taking insulin, you will really want to watch for lows and reduce your insulin. The other thing is as your weight goes down, your insulin dose will go down. So you will be in a period of a lot of adjustment. Remembering when you start it, that you're going to have to change your insulin dose. You're going to have to watch your dex a lot closer and be careful. I have seen
Okay.
people's A1C. Actually, I've had one chap who was told he was type 1, and it turns out he was type 2, and he went from 200 units a day to none after he lost about 100 pounds.
Steve, did you have any follow-up to that?
Yeah, and thanks for asking and answering the question. I went on Ozempic because I found that I was putting on weight, and I heard you say earlier on today that if you're doing it right, you'll be putting on weight. So
Losing weight.
not the Ozempic,
Okay.
but sorry, okay, sorry, I'll start again. So I was not on Ozempic, I've been on insulin, and I started putting on weight. I was only diagnosed 4 years ago at the age of 61 as type 1. And so I just found my weight has been creeping up, not a lot, but it's been creeping up steadily. I put on maybe 10, 12 pounds. And so I went on Ozempic. I've lost 10 pounds and I've bottomed out now. But does insulin make you put on weight? How does that work? Just taking
Insulin itself will not put on weight, but it is an appetite stimulant so that you will be hungrier when you're taking insulin. And insulin allows you to keep every calorie that you've eaten. Whereas when you don't have enough insulin, you won't keep it. It'll go in and out and it'll damage your body as it going through. But insulin, when you're in control, you will gain weight. So it's actually you may not agree with that, but it actually is a positive thing when I see patients who've been recently diagnosed gain some weight.
So the gaining weight is a good thing because it means
It
something's under
is.
control. And then
Yes.
the Ozempic kind of is a good thing too because it's knocking the weight back, which I'm finding in my sort of I do a lot of exercise. I'm finding that difference in weight makes a
Yep.
difference for me.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I just got a message from Stephanie. Stephanie, it's so great to see you. If we could open up the questions to the audience. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Unless someone is on the call who had a question, but it wasn't asked. So I want to give you a chance to ask a question that you definitely submitted.
I just want to say one thing. There was one
Okay.
question that is come up about stats and COVID that I found quite interesting. Apparently, people with long COVID are more often female, although that's only slight. It's usually the higher BMI, they're more likely to get long COVID. And interestingly, type 2s are more at risk. I read an interesting article that suggested that type 1s, because they're taking care of themselves, are less likely. So there is a positive.
Okay, thanks, Gerri. Stephanie, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yes. Yes, because it's burning. First of all, I'm really mad that no one told me that my cycle would affect my glucose absorption or how insulin resistant or sensitive that I'm going to be on a rotating monthly basis. But now I've entered the wonderful world of hormone replacement therapy, and I was expecting my blood sugars to stabilize now that I'm taking the same amount of hormones day after day. But it just kind of like changed when my insulin sensitive and insulin resistant times are. So I'm like, I'm not super old. I'm 42, but my gynecologist was like, cool, you can take this till you're 60. And I'm thinking like, well, that's a long period of time that nobody's telling me how to navigate my blood sugars or making adjustments to insulin. So I guess my question is like, should we will there be some consistency or is it just going to be more random than ever before? Or what do I have ahead of me, Gerri?
Well, I kind of think everything with diabetes is random. I'm
Yeah, of
sorry, I
course.
wish it,
Yeah.
and a lot of what you're seeing now is because of the CGMs. You would have been
Yes,
told before that you didn't really see it, you've made a mistake,
sure.
you didn't wash your hands, you've heard it all.
Yeah.
So then a lot of what you're seeing is kind of new stuff. And we're thinking, yeah, my type 1s knew about it. How come I didn't?
Mhm.
So that, do I hold hope that you're going to stabilize? No, sorry. That's called cure. However, Dr. Patey came on and did something about encapsulation therapy and stem cell. And we have two patients from BC Diabetes who aren't taking insulin. And
Oh.
she still got a cycle, one of the ladies, and said that it's way better.
Hmm.
So the treatments are going to be better, but in the meantime, Stephanie, unfortunately, you have 42 things that affect your blood sugar. You're a science experiment of one. If you find somebody who gives you the magic formula, he's probably also got swampland he wants to sell you. Yeah.
Fair enough. I just wish there was more
Oh,
literature
I
or
do
just that
too. Yeah.
just that it was even just mentioned to you. Like FYI, you're going to
Mhm.
embark on this treatment journey. It's going to have these effects on your glucose control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Stephanie, you're the third person today who's mentioned menopause, perimenopause, premenopause, just in that family of topics. And we actually do have I think is the world's expert in that topic, Geraldine Pryor.
Yes.
So I'm happy to have her come do a special session. I mean, because I'm just assuming the women are interested and men are probably not as. So let's see if I can get her in next month for a special
She's a
session
wonderful
on the
person.
people. Yeah, she is literally
Yay.
the world's expert.
Good. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wanted to ask a question from the audience? Okay, great. I'm going to keep going then with the pre-submitted questions. This is from Janet, and I know she had to leave, but is it normal for one's insulin requirements to increase substantially as one gets older, as in quadruple?
Yes, part of it is weight, part of it is activity, part of it is that you've got lumps and bumps under your skin that you don't feel, but are there because you've been injecting insulin under your skin and they cause scar tissue. Move it around, use all your jiggle. And yes, the short answer is yes. The other thing is, I almost think you get a tolerance. So I tell people, if you're really not getting the effect, try a different one and see if you do. Be gentle, be careful, watch your CGM. But if if insulin A doesn't work, try insulin B and see if it makes a difference.
Okay, and Janet, I don't think you're on, but if you are. Okay, next question. Why are people with type 1 told not to take Tylenol when wearing a Dexcom G7?
Apparently, Tylenol in the doses of 1,000 mgs under every 6 hours doesn't affect, but when you get into the higher doses, which is not a good idea, guys, really, it'll screw up your liver, affects the blood sugars and it will affect the readings so that your Dexcom will be inaccurate, and that's why.
Okay, and does this apply to any CGM or just Dexcom? Is
I
the
think
follow-up question.
I think Dexcom is the only one that's highlighting it because the max dose for Tylenol is 1,000 and they assume people aren't going to take it. I would suspect that's for any CGM.
Okay. And why are folks with type 1 strongly encouraged not to take ibuprofen like Advil or Motrin?
I didn't see anything. I couldn't understand why they were told that. I looked it up before today and I've looked it up on other times and I've never seen ibuprofen not, it doesn't seem to affect it. So I didn't understand why they were told not to.
Okay, and talk to us about vitamin D. Why is it so strongly recommended, and what does it have to do with people with type 1 particularly?
Well, and that gets into kind of the wild world of whether or not you should take supplements or not. And it's not so strongly recommended that every endocrinologist say you have to take vitamin D. I would say that less than half say or prescribe it. We live in a first world country. We have first world foods. We're not living in Newfoundland where all it does is rain. We do get a lot of rain, but we get a lot of sunshine. So that I never would recommend vitamin D, but some people do it because it has it has an effect on calcium absorption. And if you've got osteoporosis, you might want to take it. Some suggest that a low vitamin D level, you're more at risk for cardiovascular issues. But that's not something that's named in the cardiovascular uh, research. They will say you could add a vitamin D, but it's not, give them a vitamin D, you need it right away. Yeah. So for me, I'd say, are you eating your broccoli? Have you had a banana? There's a variety of other, do you drink milk? Go walk in the sunshine. You probably do more than taking a pill. The other thing is most vitamins go in and out, so you're renting it, you're not keeping it. Yeah.
Okay, there's a question with Laurette, and I know you're here, Laurette, but what have people found to be the best overpatch for the Dex G7?
Everybody's gotten a thought. I'm not a fan of over patches. Dexcom now sends some out, and I would say if you're going to use one, I would use one of theirs. But I would be very hesitant about putting another adhesive on. I would look at something like Skin Tack, or phone around and see if you can find an ostomy nurse with glue that she happens to like. If you do use an ostomy glue, you want to not use Remove or something harsh to get the adhesive off. Use an oil. My kid uses peanut butter. Why not? As long as it comes off. Vegetable oil, baby oil.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Gerri?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
I've noticed the last maybe three sensors that I got, the G7s, that
Yeah.
the overpatch they supply has been improved.
Mhm.
It originally it
It
used
is
to
a-
peel
it is-
away. I was always having to glue it down. Now it stays, and it stays well. And they've increased the hole size so that it fits over really well now. You don't have to fight with it.
And you'll find that the smaller they make that sensor, the more likely it will be to fall off, and the more likely you're going to have to put a second adhesive. When the Freestyle 3 comes out, it is smaller than a dime. And one of the problems they're having, it keeps flicking off. Get a glue, get something that's been tested on somebody else instead of you being the experiment for Dexcom. They're experimenting to see what works. Ileostomy and colostomy people, they've already done the testing. They know which glues work. So shop around and get something that glues it on. Tegaderm does work, but yet it's another, I see this in the chat room. Tegaderm or Opsite does work, and it's used for intravenous's. It would be that plastic stuff that would go over your intravenous, but it's another adhesive. And just how much money do you want to spend on this? They're not covered under any healthcare benefit. And a Tegaderm patch can be as much as $3 a pop.
So you were saying Skin Tack, right?
I use Skin Tack. That's my favorite because I can get it.
Yeah.
But do shop around. A small bottle in Canada or in from Shoppers is $90. I get it from the States, an 8-ounce bottle, not just a 4 for 20. So shop around.
A bottle. I had no idea they came in bottles. I've only bought them on
Yes.
Amazon as a
Well, I do the bottle. I've got an 8-ounce bottle. It would last me my lifetime, and
Oh.
it's got a little wand. You put it on and it sticks.
Oh.
The wipes are really handy, but they cost about triple and
Right.
they dry out. If you do go with the wipes, put them in a baggie and put them in the freezer. They last a lot longer.
Oh, thank you. That's a
Yeah.
great trick. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, it's almost 7:30. I want to thank Gerri for, fielding all these questions, educating us all these years. It's not just this one session. I think you're probably, essentially the smartest endo I know. Even though you don't have the degrees behind you. But no, I really feel like our community, the T1D community, the Huddle community, the Reach Out community, they have all are in so much gratitude for having you, because you are willing to answer questions any day, any night, morning, evening. And so that is what we appreciate. So thank you, Gerri, again for hosting this huddle. Next month, we're going to be hosting Katie Bartel, who is a registered dietitian, and she lives with type 1 herself. She's led a couple huddles. And for Stephanie and the other women who have mentioned the interest in learning more about menopause, perimenopause, premenopause, I'll have Geraldine Pryor do a special session, and we'll let you know, definitely, and see when you guys are available. And finally, in March, we'll have Jordana Capelouto, who is the endo who is an expert in Ozempic and all the other weight loss injectables. She's going to be coming in to talk about that topic. So thank you again. Have a great night. I'm going to have my team stay on so we can just debrief, but thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Gerri. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gerri.